we know that beauty unlocks when we challenge each other in a constructive way. This is more than important with AI. Why? Because these bots are designed in a way that they tend to please you. They will say that, oh, Elisa, you wrote a very great email. Try out a simple prompt like this. Please give me your brutally candid feedback. And you will see how the answer of AI will flip.
Welcome back to Great Expectations, the show where we explore the evolving intersection of AI leadership and the modern workplace. I'm your host, Paul Sefton. Today's guest brings a fresh and necessary lens to the AI conversation, one that's less about the tech itself and more about how leaders need to think differently because of it. Elisa Farri is Vice President and co-lead of the Management Lab at Capgemini Invent, a Thinkers 50 honoree and co-author of HBR's Guide to Generative AI for Managers. In this episode, we explore how AI is shifting from tool to thought partner, reshaping leadership, decision-making, and team dynamics. We also unpack the fear some leaders might have around appearing out of touch and how to build confidence in a world of human-AI collaboration. If you're leading through change or trying to figure out how to lead with AI instead of around it, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. Elisa, thank you so much for the time today. Really excited to have you on the show with us.
Thank you for having me, Paul. My pleasure.
The first thing that I'd love to dive into and start with is really looking at sort of this evolution of leadership in an age of AI. I kind of want to go into the psychological piece of it. I'd also like to go into the practical application of it. But if we start off with the big premise that you have in your new book around AI being described as a co-thinker, I'd love to get your take on what you mean by co-thinker and how that differs from how other people might perceive the usage of AI to be.
So co-thinking implies that every leader has access to a 24/7 thought partner who is always on, always available. And this partner augments the thinking of leaders. How? By framing perspectives, challenging assumptions, spotting overlooked spots, structuring the thought process in a more effective way. So AI can be the sparring partner that never gets tired and is always on. We are seeing in our research that co-thinking with AI leads to better quality results if and only if three ingredients are present: context, challenge, and conversation. To clarify on this, imagine you are, Paul, trying to solve a complex problem. So you can either ask Gemini to give you the best solution to your problem, and so you will be in a prompt and wait mindset, or you shift to a different way of interacting with AI and you start having a dialogue with AI. This is what we call the co-thinking with AI. And as you do the co-analysis together with AI, you share contextual knowledge, you challenge AI answers, but vice versa. You also ask AI to challenge your proposed solutions, and you have a dialogue. So you build iteratively on the answers and the inputs of AI. And this is exactly what Valentin Marguet is doing in his work. Valentin is a powertrain project leader Ferrari, and he has been an early heavy user of generative AI in co-analysis of technical problem solving. And so I think that this example sheds light on the opportunities for leaders of co-thinking with AI beyond using AI for productivity assistance.
I think the productivity assistance that you tap into at the end there is the key sort of difference, because most initial use cases were really focused on output and this idea of having not necessarily a sparring partner, but something that could do something for you, which was measured on the quality of the output and maybe the volume of the output at the same time. And it was something with the augmentation that would take a portion of your work, for example, writing your emails for you or drawing up basic calendar management or Word docs, and it would take that and manage that portion of the workload. Thinking is maybe a less tangible sense of output. So how do you sort of quantify that shift between output-based productivity versus this conversational nature of working with AI?
So when we look at the output, at the benefits of embracing a sort of collaboration between human and AI, it's not about speed. It's not about going faster, which is, let's say, the main KPI used when we're looking at AI as a productivity enhancement, as a productivity assistance. So when it comes to co-thinking, is about deeper reflection, is about seeing what you're not seeing, or even more powerfully, seeing something through lenses that you do not typically wear. Generative AI is so powerful at taking perspectives. And so that's why we need, from a leadership standpoint, be aware that these are two different ways of interacting with AI. They are equally powerful. Leaders can equally benefit from productivity enhancement and more deeper reflection. And it's a muscle they need to train because the technology can do both. So we need more and more leaders equipped with a muscle for human AI collaboration, being knowledgeable and aware of when it makes sense to shift gears, to go from productivity assistance to co-thinking and vice versa. Because remember, leadership tasks, managerial tasks do not happen in vacuum. And so it's an interplay, intertwined, done in sequence. And so once again, we are at the dawn of a new managerial capability. We need leaders to be equipped with this muscle and be aware of what the technology can do in order to steer this collaboration for, let's say, not just creating business results, but also for ensuring a responsible and ethical use of such a powerful technology.
We saw this massive rise in collaboration and a lot of cognitive fatigue from one too many meetings. But traditionally, leaders have relied on sparring with other people. So how would you advise people to know when is the right time to perhaps spar with AI and co-think with AI versus calling your peers or your team into a meeting and trying to actually have human-to-human collaboration?
Thank you for this question, because it sheds light on an aspect that is often overlooked. And this aspect is about the setting in which you're using generative AI. So let's start from the traditional and most widely used setting, the one-on-one. This is a technology that runs on devices, and so it automatically attracts you as a magnet in a one-on-one. But then, as you said, vast majority of tasks and activities and decisions that typically in large organizations are made in a very different setting. And this is the human-to-human and team setting. So the answer to your question is that there could be various ways in which you inject AI into a team setting. We're seeing, for instance, leaders who are leveraging AI before team setting exercise, which could be a workshop. It could be an ideation session. It could be a strategy session. And so they use it in preparation for team discussions. But we're seeing also other managers who are injecting AI during the team conversation. So well beyond note-taking, you can ask the generative AI-powered chatbot to contribute to the conversation. I give you a practical example. During a team meeting, which is happening online, you can ask the chatbot if there are any items that you haven't covered yet and which were supposed to be part of the conversation as per the predefined agenda. Or you can ask the chatbot to build on their discussion to further articulate, elaborate what has been discussed so far, and even to take a specific perspective, for instance, of the client you're discussing about, to give you additional insights, different lenses through which you can look at the topic that you're currently discussing. So yes, AI can be used beyond the one-on-one setting. And the main reason why we strongly recommend leaders to inject AI into a team setting is that based on our research last year, we found that leveraging the sense-making of the team is also a powerful antidote to some of the most common traps that might be encountered when using AI. And so leverage the team judgment, not just for better use of this technology, but also for anticipating and mitigating potential risks related to this technology.
When it comes to seeing leaders adopt and lean into this, is there anything that you've noticed from a trends perspective on which companies or organizations are particularly good at it, or what is potentially holding other organizations back? Because I think the higher up you go in leadership, the more often you would find people who are there because of their competencies and who might be a little bit hesitant or cautious to either fully trust in AI systems or admit that they're relying on or engaging with AI at such a high level of codependency rather than it being seen as a positive trait of having a secret weapon.
Yeah. So what's the secret sauce for widespread adoption, accelerated adoption of this technology in large organization? And this makes this mind because the answer is so simple, people tend to be very surprised. So what we found in our research is that one of the key accelerators is indeed leadership. When leaders do not just talk about the importance of AI, but show that they are using AI in first person, this activates a contagious wave inside the organization. And then it percolates across the various layers. So if we want to truly accelerate adoption, starts with and from the leadership. We need custom trainings for leaders. And that's why also we wrote a book on this, because the common use cases are unfit for the traditional leadership and executives role. And so we need to tailor the use of this technology to the needs and the goals of a typical leader's job. Second, we need leaders who role model, who walk the talk when it comes to the use of this technology. And this is so easy to be done. Okay, this is not rocket science. It's about recording video pills and sharing them internally with individual use cases, how you're leveraging it for productivity assistance, but also how you leverage it as a thought partner. It's about sending emails or also structured, let's say more structured and formal newsletters with your learning. So what you're learning as a leader along your journey is about actively scouting for the mavericks, for the Gemini users inside the organization and leverage them for your personal reverse mentoring and for your personal learning journey. So yes, leadership can be the accelerator when it shifts from just saying and announcing that AI is imperative inside the organization to really embrace it as a force of transformation on a daily basis.
And what do you think we should be expecting for the next 12 to 24 months in terms of productive output? Because all of this requires so much learning and change management. But I think the expectation has always been kind of underpinned by productive outputs. And so how do we sort of balance the expectation of the gain that we will get potentially long-term versus the short-term sacrifices we need to make to be able to learn these new technologies, socialize them, and adopt them across an organization?
Personally, I feel that the key word is learning. We need to upskill and train the entire workforce in order to prepare the workforce for what will come next. And why I'm saying this is because the vast majority of leaders still look at this technology from an outside perspective. So as a spectators, we need to avoid this spectator view when it comes to the use of this technology. On the other hand, we need to reflect and think how this technology will disrupt the way in which work is performed. The real challenge is that we need to do all of this at the same time because technology is evolving, adoption is increasing, yet slowly, not in all industries and organizations. And at the same time, we need to have a long-term view in order to anticipate what will be the impacts on the workforce. So once again, this boils down to the role of leaders and managers across the entire organization. They need to activate an ongoing communication channel with their team, which is not just about how they're using AI today, but also how they are envisioning this as a disruptive force in how work is performed. This is a challenge that we're seeing widely debated compared, for instance, to 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago, where the main focus was on the technology. Now the big chunk of the debate at leadership level is indeed about the impact, is indeed about how to prepare the organization for unlocking the long-term value while balancing the short-term impact, which, as you said, can be positive, but also in some cases have some negative impact, especially on certain jobs and tasks.
So I think one of the interesting things that you touched on earlier was that the set of skills or training that's required for leadership to really lean into co-thinking with AI is different to perhaps the broader set of advice given on how to use these tools.
Mm-hmm.
If you have someone listening to this, sitting in their office at home going, yes, I'm 100% on board, I want to do this, how do I lean into it? And they've got a prompt window up on their screen with whichever service they're using. How do you sort of guide that initial jump into the ocean in terms of the right way to go about using these tools as compared with what you might find elsewhere or as a directive more broadly for a workforce as a leader?
So first suggestion would be to go back to the most recent interactions that I had with their generative AI model and analyze the level of contribution of the technology compared to their level of contribution. Why I'm saying this? Because in our master classes, when we train leaders, we often realize that the level of contribution of the human, in this case of the leader, is very, very limited. It's like 90% contributed by AI and 10% contributed by the leader. And this sheds light on the fact that this is highly imbalanced. And so when leaders are a bit upset or they complain about the poor quality of the answers that they get from AI, is mainly because they are not interacting in the proper way. They are not sharing feedback. They are not building on AI answers. They are not having a real conversation with AI. So first thing first is to have, let's say, an objective analysis of the last interactions in order to understand what's our level of maturity with regard to thinking and talking with AI. The second is that most managers feel sometimes the blank prompt syndrome, what we call the blank prompt. And this could be because they don't know what a good question could be, what a good prompt could be. And so here, our suggestion is very simple. Why don't you ask AI directly? So to give you, for instance, 10 potential questions, good questions that you can ask AI, and then ask for another 10. As I said at the beginning, this is a thought partner that never gets tired, so leverage it. And the third recommendation is challenge, challenge, challenge. Also in a human-to-human setting, we know that beauty unlocks when we challenge each other in a constructive way. This is more than important with AI. Why? Because AI tends to be very, very complacent. These bots are designed in a way that they tend to please you. They will say that, oh, Elisa, you had a very great idea. Oh, Elisa, you wrote a very great email. And so our tip for leaders is try out a simple prompt like this. Please give me your brutally candid feedback. And you will see how the answer of AI will flip. Okay, so these are 3 very practical recommendations that we're finding very useful to open the eyes of leaders and embark them on a journey of co-thinking with AI.
It's I think, a fascinating journey of adoption and one that will rely heavily on trust. So I'm curious to get your take on how do we balance trust with leaning into something? Where do we maybe exercise some caution or fact check something or read through it versus leaning into a sparring partner and co-thinker who we are fully engaging in a high trust relationship, if we can call it that, off the bat?
So judgment is imperative. In every single interaction with AI, we need to ensure that our sensor of judgment is always switched on. That's our main recommendation. And Paul, we are seeing judgment in action right now. We are having a conversation. You are asking question. I'm thinking about the best answer to convince and pitch you my thesis. While you're listening to me, you're trying to validate and to challenge, what I'm saying, or to connect with other interviews that you might had, or based on your experience, and so on and so forth. So the first antidote to the trust trap, in my opinion, is embracing co-thinking. Because if we have more and more people talking with AI, they will automatically tend to switch their judgment sensor. It will be on. Why? Because when you simply click and wait, prompt and wait for some magic to happen, the tendency is to switch it off. I give you a very practical example. When you use the calculator, you switch off your judgment because you blindly trust the calculator. You know that 2 + 2 is equal to 4. Even if you're, driving your car and you type on the calculator, you blindly trust the result and the output. In this case, we don't want leaders and people inside the organization to switch off their judgment sensor. So that's why embracing a dialogue, a conversation with AI will put them in this setting as if they would do with a human to keep the judgment sensor on. The second recommendation is that, and we already touched briefly upon this, the fact that this is a technology that attracts you like a magnet in a one-on-one conversation. When we try to inject AI in a team setting, we are seeing that the team sense making, so the way in which judgment is exercised in a team setting, is another powerful antidote to the trust trap. Why? Because you have different expertise, you have different point of views, different backgrounds, and plus there's also this mandate at team level that you as a team, you want to reach a good quality output. And so a tendency to build on each other and to challenge each other, including AI. So in the age of AI, we need more judgment, not just an individual, but also at team level, in order to deal with trust traps, but also other traps that are very peculiar of a technology that, remember, is not the calculator.
I think the way that you balance the team setting with the individual setting is one that I'm particularly keen to double click on. And the reason for this is if we look into some of the predictions that we've seen around Gen AI and then agentic AI, it's looking like one scenario or outcome might be that we go from having individual agents as knowledge workers to ending up leading teams full of agents, where you have one human leading a team of agents and basically becoming something of a fact checker and prompter. And maybe that's for better output, maybe that's for less work. If you ask the Americans, they might say it was for increased productivity. They probably think that the Europeans want longer holidays. Regardless of the outcome, though, if we're talking about the role of leadership and how it's evolving, and we're talking about the role of teams and how they will evolve, how do you see the role of leaders evolving and the role of teams evolving as AI becomes more embedded into our daily workplace?
Another powerful question. We don't know yet how the distribution of tasks will happen inside the organization. But what we do know is that there will be 3 main categories. The first category is a set of tasks that you will automate. So AI will perform such tasks. It could be in the form of agents, it could be in the form of other technologies applied to task execution, but this will be totally delegated to AI. Then there will be other tasks on the other extremes that will stay under the remit of humans. But the vast majority of tasks, we should expect them to fall into the third category. So as a blend of human-AI interaction. So when it comes to the role of leaders, we need leaders who know how to control and oversee tasks that are delegated to AI. We need leaders who keep doing what they've been doing also in the pre-AI era, overseeing the tasks and decisions made by humans. But the real challenge will be how to equip leaders in overseeing and hybrid the way of working, where humans interplay and interact with AI. So this is the real challenge for leaders as new technologies are emerging. You mentioned agentic AI. This is one of the driving force for rethinking how work is performed inside the organizations. And when it comes to this capability and skills, this is not just about being aware and knowledgeable about what this technology can do for us, but we also need to counterbalance this with the knowledge about how human should be interacting with AI. So the fascinating aspect is that we are living in an era where the way in which work has been performed over the last centuries might be totally disrupted. And so once again, we need leadership who is not a spectator. We need a leadership that is a driving force and a role model for embracing this human AI collaborative way of working.
And Elisa, to kind of try and future-proof a team, what are some of the mistakes or common pitfalls that you see leaders making today as they try and lean into the technology or resist it, but where you just think that they're not necessarily taking the right steps, or what are the things to avoid?
Well, the first thing to avoid is to look at this technology only from the perspective of productivity assistance. There's much more beyond that. And here is the opportunity of embracing co-thinking. So when the level of complexity increases, we always recommend to shift from productivity assistance to having a conversation with AI. This, I would say, is the first thing to avoid. So just to have a narrow view, a simplistic view on this technology, because it provides much more than just productivity enhancement. The second mistake is when leaders apply this technology just as a layer, okay? A layer for efficiency, a layer for productivity. And this is pretty different from the first point, because this entails a vision that is very limited when it comes to bring the benefits and the opportunities that this technology offers at scale. So if you just add this as a layer, you're unlocking a limited value. You need to look at it as a pervasive and fully transformative force to rethink what have been doing. And so the second recommendation is to ask themselves, how can AI help us do a certain thing differently? And this is typically the springboard, the prompt that we give executives and leaders to trigger a first human-AI conversation. So instead of simply starting from what you know and the approach you always use for doing a specific task, ask AI, to provide a novel view and also to inject an element of divergent thinking when you look at a specific task that you would like to do. Otherwise, the risk is that you will be trapped in the old way of doing things, adding the layer of AI on top. Whereas the real differentiator in the future will not be the layer, that, let's be honest, it will be soon a commodity because every organization will be applying the same layer, but it will be in the transformative power. And here, once again, becomes central the human. So the real power is to leverage the human creativity, the human thinking, the human expertise, augment this with AI and transform how things are doing inside the organization. So, as I said, beyond productivity, look also at the potential of co-thinking. And second, do not limit to the surface. Try to leverage AI as a fully transformative way of performing work, but also doing business.
And I'm curious to get your take on how that applies in a global setting, because we've seen sort of this concept of a wealth gap growing in the past few generations. And I think there's quite a bit of speculation that there'll be a similar AI gap where future generations in the workforce will either have AI smarts or significantly lack them. Is there anything that you're seeing right now in global organizations in terms of different teams being more or less resistant to adopting the technology. It could be down to different cultural settings. It could be down to different company sizes. It could be down to budgets and who has the budget to be able to deploy certain AI technologies, or maybe sectors where there are some more regulated sectors where there's sort of a lag in the capability to adopt new technologies quickly. How do you see all of these sort of factors playing out and then impacting the overall landscape of usage and familiarity or competence in AI?
So we need to differentiate, Paul, between exogenous and endogenous factors, because there are exogenous factors that apply, let's say, globally to all organizations, notwithstanding the size, the industry. And you mentioned some of them. Regulation is indeed an exogenous factor that you do not control and you have to comply with. But then there are some pretty endogenous ones. So the ones that are pretty peculiar of the specific organization at hand. And in this case, what we're seeing is that culture is a key differentiator factors when it comes to the adoption of AI and the ability to unlock benefits and potential of AI. And to be honest, we've been here before. Okay, so we've been exploring innovative cultures and innovative organizations for the last decades. So why not building on what we learned in the past and double down on these elements now? Because we need more and more innovative culture-oriented organization in order to equip the workforce with the right mindset for using this new technology. So when we, in our research, when we, let's say, list or rank order leaders / organizations based on their ability to really adopt in a powerful way this technology, the cultural aspect is one of the very first indicators of such an ability. And so once again, we should never forget the human element. And the human element is about more soft skills and more hard skills, a mix of mindset, culture, habits, behaviors. And never forget that culture is shaped on a daily basis, and leaders have an important role in shaping this aspect. So once again, we go back to the role of the leaders. We go back to the fact that they need to role model not just the use of AI, but also some key behaviors that create the psychological safety inside the organization for embracing such a disruptive change. So when we see that leadership is actively using and not just talking about AI. And when we see that there's the right culture with the right ingredient that triggers an innovative experimental mindset, still very disciplined and structured, well, we are laying the foundations for an organization that can thrive in the age of AI.
Really, really interesting, Elisa. And I think, conscious of time now, if I were to close out with one question, it would probably be the advice or closing words. We've covered so much practical advice and tangible takeaways for leaders. But what do you think the one key ask or takeaway that you'd give to leadership is in terms of how to truly innovate and lean into this change to be able to yield positive results in 1, 3, 5, 10 years' time?
So first of all, be the accelerator. So remember that every day you can either accelerate or slow down this process. So feel this as your own responsibility. Be accountable for this. Second, activate the communication channel within your team. Ask at least once a day to your team or to one of your team members, have you used generative AI today? What did you do? Was it helpful? What was the main benefit? What did you learn? And do this also from a selfish standpoint, it's your daily opportunity for learning from your peers, from your team members, how they are using it. And the third point is about judgment. So do not limit to exercise your role as leader as going through sort of a checklist of do's and don'ts when it comes to the use of this technology. Create the right environment for your people, for your organization to share and learn on an ongoing basis what is working, what is not working, what are risks or traps that make them feel uncomfortable about using this technology. Because let's be honest, not all people feel comfortable in using a model that is probabilistic. Okay? So your role as leaders is also to help them, share, also from an emotional standpoint, what they like and what they don't like, and accompany them in this journey. It's true that it's a journey that is triggered top down, but you should never forget about the human dimension. And so listen to your people and ask them how they are living this journey also from an emotional standpoint.
Well, thank you so much for the time today, Elisa. I really appreciate you joining us on the show.
Thank you, Paul, for having me.
And that's it for this episode of Great Expectations. If you want to find out more information about implementing the right AI solutions in your workplace, see more episodes, or find our latest research, go to jabra.com. I'm Paul. Thanks for listening.